educational event on Fix the Foundation, getting your data ready for territory planning. It is middle of November. If territories are important to you next year, I hope you've started some work on them or maybe are getting a couple of different iterations, variations done. But regardless of where you are in your territory journey, we're going to be talking about some things you can do over the days, weeks, months that will involve finalizing those territories as we get ready for 2026, which is a little bit frightening to say.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Matthew Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op. We have a global community of 18,000 plus operators from every nook and cranny of the world, as you can see based on some folks we have in the audience today. We have a lot of different programs we run, digital events like these, in-person events, newsletter, Slack group, courses. I'll drop a couple links to some things in the chat as we go. And we also do an annual RevOps AF event, which we're going to do next year. Again, we'll be announcing that at some point over the next week or so. So keep your eye out for that. But with that, I'm going to do a quick introduction with the panelists that we have today and then turn it over to Kevin to get us rolling. So we have Kevin Davis, who is the CEO and co-founder over at BoogieBoard.ai. They are building a pretty incredible territory product and solution. So Kevin knows a whole lot, I'll just say that, about territories. And then we also have Jen Igartua, who is the CEO over at Nimbly, one of the best RevOps consulting firms, if not the best firm out there. And she also has some strong plant game along with just being an awesome person. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you go ahead and get us rolling on the topic and the content for today?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Volm, and thanks everybody for making the trek to this webinar. Matt, can you let me know that you can see my prezo?
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
Jen, I didn't tell you that ChatGPT was going to produce some images that are not technically your likeness, but maybe related to your likeness.
Is that you and me? You and me?
It is. But this is us being delighted by a self-driving car.
That's amazing.
We're very excited for the future, and the reason why we're all here today is this is a very hopeful conversation, our first hopeful conversation around getting data ready for territory planning, probably ever, because for a while we were in the dark ages. So today we're going to talk about a few kind of core ideas. We'll give you a state of the union. I want to kind of interview Jen about a lot of the projects that she's been doing. She's on the front end of a lot of these new areas of development, and then I can talk about how this all relates to territories. But some of the big things we're going to talk about are that the dark ages are over. We will rejoice as a group.
Yay.
Yes. And we're going to give you some new direction because we're going to talk about how RevOps is the hunter now. For a long time, people were the hunters, and now RevOps is the hunter. Yay. We are on the road to self-driving territories, which is why I have that car in there. I will explain what that is and a little bit of a path to get there. And then unfortunately tell you that the real thing that everybody needs to do is not the sexy stuff, but of course, the boring work first.
Boo.
I know. I had something like that written in parentheses, but it felt too negative. So I just said, okay.
Okay. Beautiful. You know, I got into my first Waymo and I did look like that. I thought it was amazing. I had a blast.
I was in one about 20 minutes ago, and I can't resist the urge to call my dad every single time because he just gets so excited. I FaceTime him every single time I'm in one.
Cute.
But while we're enjoying our Waymos, we have to remember where we came from, which was the dark ages. I started this company, BoogieBoard, a couple years ago. The way you implement territory design software is you say, hey, I need to hook into your CRM so that I can pull in all of your account data and your rep data, things along those lines. And it was weird when we would ask people for this because they would feel like afraid or scared or embarrassed, like they were letting us into their dirty house. They would say, like, you won't believe how bad our data is. And I thought that was strange because I was like, well, you know, my expectation isn't that your data are going to be perfect, and I probably will believe it. I've seen lots of these. But I realized that these folks that were giving us this sort of embarrassment, this unfortunate sentiment had been beaten down, oftentimes by sales. Sales is good auditors on the cleanliness of data. And so the vibes around this had been very bad, and RevOps teams for a long time felt powerless from a budgetary standpoint, from an actionability standpoint, from a tooling standpoint. And so my personal experience started as a sales rep, where I was the one complaining about this account data. I got into operations, started to understand how it all worked, then started this company and started to realize the state of the union just a couple of years ago was still like generally a very poor sentiment. And I wanted to ask Jen, this is Jen encountering
That's me.
a blue wolf in the wilderness. And so Jen, I was wondering if you have an early career memory from maybe your
Yeah.
first time on an account data project or territories that comes to mind.
Oh, that's funny. For those of you that don't know, I worked at a company called Blue Wolf, and Blue Wolf was Salesforce's biggest partner. I was like a big, very focused on sales and Salesforce, and I was very focused on top of funnel. I was very focused on marketing automation. It was a really frustrating experience because nobody wanted to listen to me, but it turned out to be a gift because I learned really quickly about the need to work across silos, the need to do kind of the real work to make sure that, I don't know, teams that should be aligned, like marketing and sales, are working together when a lot of times there's friction. And when we talk about account territories and account mapping and data integrity, it affects the entire company. And if you get it right, like for sure, territory planning will be easier. And that is, even though it's myopic, like for sure, you'll get some gains. But if you, not to blow up scope, but I'm going to blow up scope, if you elevate it to a point of thinking about the impact that a really strong account and territory and data integrity can have for your business, it affects everybody from marketing, sales, CS, obviously all the way to product and finance. So I think that was a really early learn for me, working with sales and marketing, that anything I did in one area, I had to think about the impact downstream and, break down not only people silos, but like tech and data silos. And it's something that I really advocate for. Again, it's the boring stuff that has really big impact.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get into the way that I met Jen. And pretty quickly after, like 2022 feels like a long time ago. And in the data world, it is, because all of a sudden, hope started to abound a bit. We bring in all this data into our platform so we can measure certain things, and we have anecdotal evidence from the customers that we work with. The data accuracy percentages increased in our tool. Duplicates were reduced. The number of viable fields increased. Companies weren't just saying design territories based on annual revenue and industry or what have you. They would have more interesting expressions of their market. They might have hiring signals. They might have some more advanced scoring. They might be scraping 10Ks and finding something specific to their company. And we were able to see that this information was coming in and was actually being utilized in territories. They were even building more thorough account hierarchies, which is still one of the world's harder problems. These entities that have multiple entity structures don't just have like beautiful legal agreements that are publicly available for everyone to see. They often don't know themselves exactly how they're interrelated, so it's very hard to map. But there are improvements in hierarchy types and the ability to manipulate these things. And the last thing is that seller confidence at a lot of these companies was increasing. And RevOps was increasing in its power and stature, and the vibes generally were getting better. And so this sort of solidified for me where I think we turned a corner. And this is how I met Jen. Was we had a mutual client. We became a vendor of theirs when they were ready to do some territory planning. And I went into that conversation where I said, can you please send us your account data, the things we need to get going? And it was just the cleanest one I'd seen. It was very clean. It was very high quality. They understood their market really well. They understood what their sellers needed really well. And so I became a follower of Jen a bit in that sense. But it also made me just feel very positive about kind of the opportunity here. And so, Jen, I was wondering if you could just sort of give the scope of like what products is Go Nimbly doing now in the realm of data, and how you sort of think about the different angles here.
Yeah. I think we're in a place right now where there's been a lot of pressure to be AI first from leadership. I think we're seeing that like more than 50% of AI initiatives are essentially top down. And when you get to the crux of it, you can't do anything interesting without the great data, infrastructure, and even architecture and data modeling, and making sure that that's in a really great place. So that's something that we've double down on. The good news is it's cheaper to do it than ever before. And the other good news is executives actually care about it. So I'm sure folks on here that are in RevOps, you have pitched dedupe projects, you have pitched data normalization projects, and they get squashed. They're not getting squashed as often now. I think everybody's realizing that this is very foundational. And again, it's cheaper to do. And then the second piece that we're like, of course, get the data right. The second piece, which is one of the things I'm sure that you'll touch on a bunch, is we really have to have this orchestration mindset. We have to think about, yes, there's AI, yes, there's good data, but ultimately what we're looking for is workflows. We need to think about, again, you mentioned like we had a really big emphasis on the end user. How does sales need to absorb this information? Do they need to see it in a field? Do they need to see it in a summary? Do we need to push that information? And we're essentially creating like orchestration and workflows, not point solutions, not like, these kind of random acts of AI where you see, I get pushed some information, but I'm not thinking about the overall workflow. And so those are two big emphases. Of course, it all rolls back to go-to-market efficiency. That's what everybody's obsessed with, but it ultimately anchors on really great data and then an orchestration mindset.
Makes so much sense. And the art of the possible is clearly there. And I think so sometimes there's this pressure now to say, okay, I've got this G2 chart from 10 years ago. Yeah, and it's sales intelligence, right? It's part of the category now. But there was like a few players selling enrichment data. And this is now like you can't even look at the chart.
Yeah.
So Jen, I would imagine people come to you and they say, well, which enrichment provider should I use? How do you handle that conversation? And then we can get into, orchestration as well.
Yeah. And look, this is a kind of an eye roll from a consulting perspective, but we want the outcome. Like before we go and say, hey, we need to get better data, I really need to understand, what are we trying to do here? Is this a top of funnel initiative that's going to tell me I need different kind of data? Is this an insights, problem? Is this a, bottom of funnel, I don't understand my customers, I don't know who they are problem? So we really want to elevate it to that. And that will help us take that map and half it pretty immediately. And then the other big thing for us is we're really big on the consolidation play, because you can go buy every tool. The work is in integrating it, implementing it, normalizing it, and getting into the right places. So we would rather have a pretty unique and small group of vendors that we're kicking off with. Then once that's in a really good place, let's go do the fun stuff. And I think this is one of the really fun things about being in RevOps right now is for sure we have this consolidation play happening, but then we also have a propensity to build and DIY now more than ever, which is a really, really fun place to be in. But, it's got its own scale problem, so you have to manage it really well. And so I think right now, yes, you can see what's on here, but in that map, maybe it's hidden. There's also this kind of like DIY bucket, which is like this kind of get agents to scrape websites and get your own data points that are very unique to you. Like the customer that you're talking about is a climate tech platform. They care about folks who have a climate commitment. Getting a climate commitment, data point from ZoomInfo is not a thing. We actually tried to get them to do it. And we ultimately had to go and scrape and find that information and normalize it and put it in a good place. So I think your map, like try to get it to the few numbers, or use an orchestration platform that allows you not to have to manage multiple vendors and get it in the same place. And then secondly, DIY those hard to find data points that can actually be competitive advantages to you.
Absolutely. We've started doing some of this DIY stuff ourselves. We try to find companies where territories are a big pain in the neck. And so we scrape a bunch of seller reviews where they're talking online about, and they might be complaining at a higher rate than they would be at other companies.
Oh, that's fun.
I would have never been able to build a web scraper a couple of years ago. Now I can actually do it. It's really fun.
Sorry, that's so interesting. I need to know more. What is like you're going to like a Glassdoor kind of place to see, the actual sellers at the company complaining, or like a G2, or how does it?
There's a couple different like review boards where they would be complaining, and we can basically say, all right, their standard review rate, because there'll be scores on these websites, is X. Right. These have a largely negative sentiment. And then we can pull quotes from that, which is really good for outreach, or if there's a new hire, if a new CRO comes on, we say, hey, just so you know, you've got a 10% higher complaint rate on territories than other. Here's what people are saying. No pressure. We'll talk to you when available.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think we're early in this, but as we talk about like deep research being cheaper, right? The fact that you can do that today, you couldn't have done that 5 years ago. It would have been too expensive. And so as you're getting these, one of the biggest complaints that you get a lot from, sellers, you're always going to get this. And we're never going to not have complaints when you roll out territories because everybody's going to advocate for themselves. But one of the things that we get a lot is, of course, you can do the number, you can cut it in a variety of different ways, but it's points like that where could we get really interesting data points on how large is the problem for customers, how ready are they to buy, and start to incorporate some of these unique data points when you're carving out territories so that it is more balanced.
Absolutely. We did a session. If anybody on the call wants to go and look, there's one in the archives with the Cannonball GTM folks who their whole thing is finding the existential data point for your market and then finding a way to get that. And it's exactly what you just said, Jen, and it's often at an extreme fraction of the cost. We forked a couple of their prompts, which are all available in our resource library, which I'll share at the end of this call as well.
Amazing.
But to your point about outcomes, so art of the possible is great. Everybody now has robust opportunity, but what is actually needed for territories, right? Territories probably can be kept pretty simple from the sheer amount of fields that we need. The company that we were talking about before, it wasn't that they handed us, 1,000 fields and they said, let's build the most complex model possible. No, it's account data, it's probably some opportunity data, and it's probably some role data. Where is that going to flow into? It's going to flow into a territory model. So those are your bigger pieces of logic that are rules that are in your business. Your segmentation, employee size, some sort of proxy that you use for a type of customer that you sell to, regionality, industry, micro industry. You may have balance goals. This is how you tell a seller, we design territories based on X, Y, and Z. This is how we're defining equity. This is how we want you to focus. You now have access to way more first-party data than ever before. You can have really good revenue numbers. If you have a hybrid or AM model, account management model, scores, signals are now more available. You need some data to lock accounts in place to say which accounts should not be moved. That's opportunity metrics, that's activity data, geographical data. And then you need some role relativity. For the person that is related to this territory, how senior are they? How does their quota impact things? What do I want them to focus on? I think when we see the last slide, there's a ton available, but with this, we can try to focus it on an outcome of simplicity of a few fields that we need to get us going. Jen, anything you would add that I'm missing in terms of like just little tactical things to prep for territories?
No, what's funny is you look at this and you go, oh, easy. Here are the building blocks. I got to get it right. And I think what happens is when this foundation isn't in a good place, and then on top of it, you try to do really innovative things that are non-standard, it breaks. And so I think the biggest encouragement I can have, if you are on the journey where, you're new to territories, you're just rolling those out, or you've had a really big shakeup, you need to get this to a place where you're saying, hey, my foundation is really strong before you try to do anything, on top of it.
I totally agree with that. And what could a good foundation lead to? I'm calling it self-driving territories. So I'm saying we're on the road to self-driving territories. And this is something we can again see. When we started our company, we didn't have a product. We started as consultants. We did territory design for a bunch of people. How did you do that? Even just a couple of years ago, you pulled the data from whatever sources you could in the most efficient way possible, got them into spreadsheets, and then you tried to grab all the intuition and manual inputs from various people to design territories in a spreadsheet. I know that many people on this call don't have access to other tooling outside of spreadsheets. We have spreadsheet templates available for you. You can run a good design process in spreadsheets. You just got to think through how you're going to do it. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the call. The next would be assisted, right? You have some more deeply rooted analytical tools to provide more real-time insights or suggestions, but still rooted mostly in that kind of people making faster, smarter decisions. And then 3 is where we are today with some of our most advanced customers. And I call this algorithmic territory design. So algorithms are making suggestions and decisions based on logic and goals. So the tool is now saying, based on data that you're feeding us in real time, we think you should move accounts here. That might be happening at an end of year territory design scenario. It might be happening with in-year territory management. And then the last stage is this full self-driving. And we have not met a company that is interested in doing this yet. I know that because when I started the company, I tried to sell this vision and nobody would talk to me. So I can confirm that it's not there yet. But this is the territory model, and the data that feed it are completely alive and autonomous. Data is coming in the way that you want it, and the ROE is sort of self-actualizing. It doesn't exist yet today, but I do think it's very possible, and I'll talk about that here again in a minute. So, Jen, with the companies that you work with, what do you think is motivating them to come to you for a project in this area? Like, obviously, we can talk about, okay, cool, I get full self-driving territories, but like, what is the benefit of laying a better foundation to enable something like that?
Oof, big question. I'm going to A to C this question a little bit, which is right now with the promise of what AI can do and automation can do, and the fact that we should be able to do more cheaper. I think one of the promises that we've all been given is we're going to give sellers back time. And that's a big driver right now for a lot of go-to-market leadership teams. Is if I think that Gong Labs did something where they said about 30% of a seller's time is spent on actual revenue generating activities. And so, okay, great. What are we doing for the other 60%? Part of it is managing your accounts, and is this mine and is it not mine, and deduping and getting things back in the right order, and account territory issues, and so quit, and I have to refactor all this. All of that, I lovingly call internal bullshit. And I think there is a really, big push on how do we create these programs that allow for these, like, this is business as usual work. Like, it's innovative right now, but it should be business as usual work, which is get accounts assigned to the right rep, give them the data points and the information they need to, do their job, to break in, to actually do the revenue generating work. And so ultimately, we're trying to save rep time. We're trying to give them more selling time. And we also need to make sure that these are balanced, because, you get this wrong, and no wonder some of your reps are reaching quota real easily and others don't. And so there's like a fairness attribute here, that especially at large organizations, it can be really easy to get wrong.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I've been going to these revenue conferences, I don't know, since I started, and there's inevitably a slide that says, hey, you wouldn't believe how little time that salespeople actually spend selling. And I know that that's true because I am a salesperson at heart. And I think now we have some evidence that in our little world of territories, we can improve that to our amount. And then in all the other areas you mentioned, rep retention, right? If I get a bad territory, I should probably leave, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good decision for me to do that. So we talk art of the possible, again, self-driving. Thank you all for bearing with me as we talk about the future, but it seems crazy, but like, again, we can root this in really simple workflows. Territory carving, right? We are talking about grouping accounts based on some premise. Again, as Jen mentioned, like relatively simple stuff that if we focus on the fundamentals can get right. Are there major territory management workflows qualifying in and disqualifying accounts? Maybe we have a signal that qualifies an account in. Maybe we have the reverse. This account should be qualified out. A rep joining or leaving the company. These are the major workflows that we're solving for. It's not crazy, right? This person is gone. We need to figure out how we should distribute their accounts. When you start actually writing down all of the territory management workflows, it starts to become a little more possible. And Jen, I'm curious if there are any other kind of workflows that come to mind for you, and maybe that you have pie in the sky that you would like to see automated or cleaned up.
I don't necessarily have this is pretty core, but what I'll say is I'm very jazzed about this, about seeing things as essentially jobs to be done, right? These are the jobs to be done, and how do we automate those things? And I think this mindset versus the mindset of, hey, I'm going to get an AI SDR and I don't need SDRs anymore, is the way operators should be thinking about this, which is like, actually cut the work. Whether or not you need an SDR is an existential problem, but you probably don't need folks doing pre-research manual. That's a job to be done. That's a place to automate. So I really love this, which is like, how do we look at all of these, and how do we look at what's the actual workflow? How much of this has an opportunity to be automated? And frankly, a lot of times in automation to have higher quality, because the machines do math better than we do and much faster. So I just love this mindset of making it. The only thing I would say isn't on here, which is a really big part of the process, is communicating back out to the business. And we got a kiddo.
Charlie had his tonsils out a couple days
Yeah.
ago, everybody. So he's being given some extreme privileges to now come in and demand popsicles
No. And
at
you know
all hours.
what? He also loves territory carving. So he's like, can I look, I've got something to say. And what he would say is that communicating back to the business is really important. He was like texting me earlier, and that this is a highly emotional process for reps. Like you
Yes.
said, I get the wrong one, or you take an account from me, or I was working that for a year. They're going to close next quarter. I know it. It's a really emotional process for everybody. And if you do take this user mindset and like, if you obsess over like the sales experience, you have to overlay this with a lot of empathy for the customer, and your customer being the salesperson in this case.
I think that's so true. And I want to dive into that a little bit more here on this next slide. And so one of the big ideas that we have for kind of everyone here is to think of yourself as the hunter within the company, as Jen, of course, decided to be when she picked up a bow and arrow and decided to get her own Thanksgiving food. And what I mean by that is when I was a sales rep and I started, my first job was selling wholesale distribution software at NetSuite. And so my job was to Google the best wholesale distributor targets for us in Texas for a significant portion of my day. I was finding the accounts. And now I think it's RevOps' job to be that hunter, to orient the company and find the right accounts for them to go after. So as that relates to account data, I'll hit on a couple of these points, but I also want to get Jen's feedback here. So one thing that is like just a really simple thing that we always recommend is to request a top 10 target list from your CXOs and your VPs. Everybody in your company that is at that level should have a pretty good idea of the top target companies that they want to go after. People in product, people in finance, people in revenue. And it's a really good referendum. Are these people saying the same things? If not, why? And they often don't get asked this. I think it's a really easy thing to build into territory planning. There's also a cultural component to this process of building that feedback loop that Jen was talking about. So Jen, as it relates to data, so RevOps is the hunter now, you're sort of orienting the company and selecting accounts, and a lot of times can also be a challenge. It puts a lot of pressure on you to make the right decisions. You've talked about building like a feedback loop with sales. Can you just talk about that as it relates to putting accounts in front of them, putting data in front of them, and how you think about that?
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're doing this operationally, right? So I'm not clicking on every single account and validating everything. I don't have the time. We don't have the human hours to do it. Again, things are getting cheaper. So you can create a lot of checks and balances. You can score things to how accurate you can have AI look at this and say, hey, how confident are you that this is good data? Like we can create all these things to get as close to a book of business that we feel really confident about. But the reality is the same thing with deduping projects or any other normalization project is we're going to get some of it wrong. And believe me when I tell you, when an AE gets their list, they're going to find that wrong account. And they need a way to tell you, and they need a way to tell you in a way that like it's encouraged. And I say this whenever we do big data projects, we have to put the sellers in the position of saying, hey, y'all, when you find something that you want to give us feedback on, whether it's an account that was actually a duplicate or an account that is in the wrong territory, here's the process for letting us know so that we can correct it with a good SLA and get you the book that's good for you. And you have to give them the ability to do that. A lot of times it's just a screen flow in Salesforce. This isn't rocket science. It's a little button that says, hey, I've got an account feedback that I need to do. They can input those fields that they need to do and then send it back and have essentially like an override function. This could be as simple as, hey, the number of employees is actually wrong. You said it was 5,000, it's 10,000. I need to be able to give you that information, especially when you have larger organizations where you don't want them editing those fields because you don't always trust that they get it right. Maybe it's a child account. Maybe we've broken it out in different ways. So how do we make it really easy and encourage this culture of data stewardship? And a lot of it, again, it's comms. It's putting them in the driver's seat of saying, hey, let us know. It's your job. It's a good thing when you find an issue because we're going to correct it and make our models smarter. So it's like cultural, and then it's easy. Give them a button where they fill it in real quick. They can create a ticket for you and you can action it from there.
Absolutely. Give them the Gen button, or in some cases, if some fields you can override, give them the permission to do that. And I think the thing that so many companies miss is this messaging.
Yeah.
RevOps get so busy, especially at the end of the year, they go through all this. They don't show their work, like a math test and say, here's all the stuff we're doing to try to put you in a great position for success. This is a collaborative effort. At the end of this, I'll share a template. We've written a document written as you, RevOps, that you can write to your sales team to say, here's how we need you to participate in this process. Here's everything that we're doing to help you, and here's how we think we can work together on this. There's also a prompt library in there to kind of help you think through some of that stuff. But most companies don't do this. If we ask them, what is your kind of account data strategy? How do you message that to sales? There is none. There might be some technical documentation on fields, but no actual messaging. Are you doing that as part of your projects, Jen? Or are you coaching them on how to develop that documentation?
For sure. Yeah, you're giving away our work for free, Kevin. It's very generous of you. Yeah, I mean, I say this a lot. I think I get asked a lot, which is like, hey, are consultants, like, is it a bad time to become a consultant? Is everything going to AI? And the reality is the majority of the work on big transformations, especially at the mid-market and enterprise, is the like comms and the structure and moving everybody in the right direction and enablement and training and that's humans. Like humans need to be enabled to do that. And having that with them, having that outcome, showing our work is a huge part of it.
And you're working mostly with like mid-enterprise style clients, I would imagine. I'm kind of in the same
Yeah.
space, mostly software related. How are you seeing folks develop their teams over time as they grow? So let's say I'm speaking now, like it almost sounds like to an individual RevOps person, you are now a hunter, right? But that is not the
Mhm.
reality as you grow. You think about this organizationally. How do you think about that?
No, I actually really love this, go to market, RevOps role where we are saying, hey, we're going to do the hunting now. Because if you think about a jobs to be done, you mentioned it in your story, Kevin. If I've got very expensive AEs doing work to research accounts, bring them in, when I know that I could do that, in mass, that's time, badly spent. I have my own feelings about this term, but it's a little bit of the messaging that I like around the go-to-market engineer, which is this like orchestration, automation minded person who is getting really close to the go-to-market team and is essentially doing it's like hire an internal revenue operator to help the hunting instead of hiring two extra AEs or
Mhm.
whatever the number might be. We should be reducing the amount of time. One of the things that I would encourage folks to do as you're making that decision, even if it's quick and dirty, do a time study. Go find out across all of your AEs, how much time are they spending finding new accounts or, editing data or deduping or trying to find, custom data points. If you get some back of the napkin math on the number of hours, that an average AE is spending doing this multiplied by the AEs, you probably have a pretty good story as to why you should centralize it.
Absolutely. And those internal documentation pieces are part of it, but you should also be presenting at sales kickoff. If you design the territories, you did a ton of work. Take that core account data from that first slide where we said this field is part of our territory model in this fashion, and then take it all the way to your strategy in that SKO. Say, here's why we did this. We care so much about putting you in a position for success sales, and we are in this with you. Refresh that messaging in quarter. Show them that you're measuring it and that their feedback loop is part of that measurement. We also we have a disease where we can make templates for everything that we do. And so we also have a present at SKO template and prompt library in our resources tab if you want to have some help on messaging and what resonates with sales there. But unfortunately, this is the part that Jen was booing at the onset. Bruce Lee would not boo this because he said,
No.
I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks at once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And I got to be Bruce Lee in the ChatGPT image because
Amazing.
pretty cool.
I don't know, Kevin, you gave yourself dark hair in all these images.
All right,
And
so
and we were all thinking it and someone had to say it.
okay, this is I'll admit the truth. The ChatGPT image generator 100% gives me completely gray hair, and I corrected it. It probably took me like 7 minutes to
Yeah,
like totally
important
fix.
work.
And I was like,
Important work.
oh, I'm so vain. This is terrible. Because yeah, it was.
Embrace the salt and pepper, man.
It looks
That's what I
good.
told it. I said these are gray streaks. Think
Gray
salt and
Yeah.
streaks.
pepper. And
She couldn't do it.
Yeah. It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's all or
pick one.
nothing.
You got to pick one.
all right. Sorry,
Beautiful.
everybody. I'm sorry, everybody, for pumping my own tires here. But all right, Jen, you are a proponent
Yeah.
of the boring work. You live in the weeds. I've taken a couple of the things that you talk about a lot here, and I want to kind of dive into them. For the like less fields is more approach, how do you get folks started around that? Do you have
Mm.
difficulty corralling teams and saying this is where you need to kick it off from?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to do this in easier ways. One, I do think that the data space is changing. Tools like Clay are really helping here, where you can, and Snowflake, has been doing this for a long time, but if you need something, I think Clay gives almost like Snowflake data powers to teams that maybe don't have that skill set or that ability. But the idea being like, for sure, in order to get, let's talk industry and maybe sub-industry. Really, the entire company should be able to run off those two fields. It should be like a parent child or like dependent pick list. And it should be I can go into SaaS and then I can break it down, or I can go into healthcare and then I can break it down. One, of course, it's real work to go find out what is this acceptable list from your entire company. There's some people work that needs to happen there so that we all agree. But once we all agree, we should ultimately be able to have two fields. And I want them in all systems. Yes, I want them in Salesforce, but I want marketing using the same field. I want that in product using the same field and downstream everywhere. The way that we've had to do that for a long time is, well, now I need Zoom info fields and they get created in CRM, and I need Cognizant fields and they get created in CRM. And then I also have my own list. And then I have my customers are also selecting it when they, log in, and I've got all these different data points. And then typically those were created as separate fields. If that's where you are today, that's fine. For the love of God, just remove visibility from those. Nobody needs to know that it's a Zoom info _ industry field. And so, at a minimum, go teach the go-to-market team in the field that these are the two fields that we use, even though they're created by all these other ones. If you do have an orchestration platform or like a Snowflake or a data warehouse, you can actually have all those fields there, and you could even remove them from CRM. You don't have to push them to CRM to then normalize them to push them back. I think we're moving from CRM being in the middle, that middle bubble when we created a tech stack, to a data warehouse being in the middle and orchestration platforms around it to get data in the right place. But the amount of alignment that you get when the entire business is reporting off of the same field, think about any board deck you've been asked to build, or SKO, or any big meeting, or any communication back out to the business. Imagine if the product team and the marketing team and the sales team were all using the same fields to tell their story, the amount of miscommunication that we would get ahead of. And so for me, even if it takes a bunch of fields to calculate one, go hide those things, go do it in the background, and give the go-to-market teams one field.
Give yourself dark brown hair, is what you're saying.
That's right. Hey, everybody wants dark brown hair. And, me and Matt are doing the work.
All right, so I'm going to repeat back to you what I heard in a couple of these areas. So less is more, get to less fields. That's what normalizing is having everyone speaking the same language, which is done through less. If you can't get there right away, make sure that you hide what's going on behind the curtain so that your consumers, your users don't have to think about how you're getting there, how the sausage is made.
Yep. And then normalizing for me, it's so funny. When I started my career, it was all about getting all data into one little field. So whether it's number of employees or, industry or country or whatever, it's still important. But what we're also finding is that it's okay to have some paragraphs and research shown in a way that can be consumed by sellers in a different way. And so I think you do have to do it in two ways. You got to go take data points, whether it's like from deep research or whether it's from calls from Gong, whatever it is, like working to normalize them in values that are important to reportable. But then you can also layer on some larger, insights in, at this point, even in a text box or pushing to Slack.
Jen, what advice would you give a RevOps that's maybe just starting out, and they're hearing you say that, okay, the customer data platform might actually be the center of the drawing. You're talking about orchestration tools. I know you have a large Clay practice yourself. If they were trying to kind of learn or pick up, one of these areas to start getting better at architecture, how would you say, go check this out or go learn this from?
Great question. I think, I have architecture here. I would say one of the biggest skill sets that I look for a great technologist, specifically in operations, you can have different spikes, but if you're spiking in technology and architecture, go understand data models. You can start with a Salesforce data model just to understand parent-child, how things are connected. All of that is what fuels great automation. It's also what fuels great reporting. So like go get really smart when it comes to modeling essentially. And then on the orchestration piece, and if you're trying to push this AI innovation, the thing that's holding back people is literacy. Go play, go build, go get into whether it's Clay or Zapier. I don't really care what workflow automation tool you're using. Go figure out what world is your oyster. Go try to solve problems. Go get smart. And then the big thing that you have to do is move from a point solution or something cool or a prototype into scale. And I'll say that that's a different skill set, and that takes orchestration and alignment and a team to get it done. But the go play, go learn it, because this is something you and I have talked about. The truth of the matter is the workflows that we're having a lot of success in, it's not workflows that you haven't thought about or been doing it. It's just that it's cheaper to do it.
Yeah.
And it's easier to do it. And so it's less about brainstorming some really innovative thing and more about committing to automating the stuff that takes time.
Absolutely. Okay. Learn what a data model is, start playing with it. I'm here for that approach. I'm going to get through these last ones really quick. So how your data might manifest in a spreadsheet. So we have spreadsheet examples that you can use, just templates in Google Sheets on our website. Oh, forgive me, this is acting wild. Let me see if I can refresh. But basically, I want to show you again how kind of standardized and simple this can be. You're going to have an all accounts view if you're doing this in a spreadsheet, right? Everything's going to be based off of 18-digit account IDs, as big y-axis, and then you have attributes about that. That's going to feed a pivot table. That is going to be your current state and your future state. This is role information, right? Very simple role information. These are balance goals, right? It's just a pivot table that you need. As you make changes here, it informs your pivot table. You need to be able to make things easy for the sellers, which you can do through a simple territory view. Copy the one that we have here or build your own, but the seller needs to be able to see what was lost, what was gained. That's that role relativity and metrics about what's happening there. And then just some overarching stuff to feed into that. But again, trying to keep it simple, taking those data points that we mentioned at the start and bringing them into something that's easy and clear here. We also just did a recording of our product with Matt. If you want to see some of the stuff that we're doing in there, of course, we're always happy to show more there.
Kevin, go back to your territory planning, like that view right here. Yeah, y'all, if you haven't, go take a screenshot of this. This is a really, especially if you don't have a tool like BoogieBoard to do it in, this is the kind of thing that you have to give your sellers when you give them a new territory. If you don't do it, they're going to go do it. And they're going to do it wrong. But they're going to go try to build this out themselves to, understand whether or not their book is good. Give this to them and get ahead of them saying things like, hey, why did I lose Etsy? Why did I lose Vonage? These accounts are really incredible and I want them back. It's like we have to go get ahead of some of those objections that each of them are going to give you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Absolutely. All right, and then we got a bunch of these resources that I mentioned throughout the call. If you think that there's another resource that would be helpful to you, please hit us up. We always want to build free and useful stuff for you as you go about your process, and let us know how it goes. Otherwise, again, inspiration. We're almost to self-driving. These are the folks coming out of the dark ages and seeing their first ever self-driving car. But I want to open it up to questions, Mr. Volm.
And then while that's happening, Kevin, can you put the link to the resources? Or maybe it's already in there, but I want some of them.
Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna sell them, Kevin. $5.
Please do. Please do. My first success as an influencer, getting my content sold.
Hell yeah.
If I guess I have one question, Kevin, I'll start with you on this because you mentioned one of the first things you did with BoogieBoard before y'all had a product was kind of expert consulting services on this. And so for people that are out there right now, maybe they're trying to sift through all the problems that they have and they're just like, where do I even get started? So if you were to kind of flash back to your territory consulting days and you dropped in at any company that an attendee is currently at today, what would be some of the first things you would look at, some of the first questions you would ask to try to figure out that starting point of where should I start to improve my territory process?
I would make a map of the stakeholders and try to figure out how I can get in their shoes as much as possible to understand what they want. What are these sales reps think is going on? What do they want out of these territories? What do the sales leaders think is going on? What do they want out of these territories? What does the operations teams need out of those territories? And where are their conflicts there? That's going to help me bring everything to the light really early. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. It's also going to help me to have relationships so that these folks know that we're trying, we're trying to solve all these problems. They are often mutually exclusive. We can't solve and please everyone. And so before I got into the data, before I got into doing any advanced modeling or specific balance goals, I would try to figure out who is involved in the process. And then I would start thinking about how can we make the most simple model possible when we're looking for the data to use for our exercise.
Yeah. Jen, would you have a different answer or the same?
No, I don't think I would just be reiterating.
Yeah. All right. Well, then for you, Jen, I guess you obviously do a lot of work for a lot of different companies within RevOps territory. Kind of design optimization is one of them. What are some of the most common
Mm.
mistakes or gotchas,
Oh,
things that customers kind of run into as it relates to territories?
fun question. Okay, I'll start up by saying we have really incredible innovative companies that we work with, right? Your Intercoms and Vantas and Zendesks and, AI companies that won't give me logo rights. And the truth of the matter is like they're doing very fun stuff and they're also doing core work that is machine building work. And the biggest thing that we always miss, one, not starting early enough. I can tell you I'm making a lot of money right now trying to sprint to get ready for territories for next year. And it always catches up with you. And I think the thing is like, I do more deduping work, in Q4 than I do any other quarter. And it's like, you got to be thinking about that stuff as ongoing. And then it's the calm stuff. And I hate to be a broken record, but this is an emotional process. And you have to get ahead of the communication out to the team. And sometimes it's very basic. And the biggest communication that I usually do is like, it is not 100% correct. There's no way that it's 100% correct. So how do we put people in the driver's seat to be able to either attest and have a process for that, identify issues, flag things, having that workflow be something that you roll out at the same time? Because what I hate is you roll something out and what you get is a ping that goes, hey, it's actually broken. Because they don't know that there are going to be issues. They just saw one issue and they're like, actually, the whole thing's broken. So get ahead of that.
Yeah. And one of the things just to double click on or that I want to really drive home is you mentioned all these great clients, customers that you have. I was also talking with another kind of early stage startup the other day who had some impressive customers that they were working with, folks like NVIDIA and others. And
Cool.
they were talking about all of these like foundational problems that like we all have
Yeah.
here or have had at other companies when we are like small companies of 5, 50, 100, 500. And it's like, you're not alone, right? Like
Yeah.
big companies have these same problems. Like you mentioned these deduping projects and like the sprinting
Totally.
to the finish line that you're doing right now. That happens everywhere. So I don't know
Yep.
if it will or if it does make you feel better, but hopefully you're not rowing that boat alone.
Yeah. The other thing I tell people a lot is every time you double, your company's changed. And, it's too expensive to create things that scale for multiple years. And so you won't. And you don't need to, especially in early stage. You should hack it. You should move quickly. And you should hopefully have so much money in the future that you can tackle it. It's okay to create some debt. I know that's really weird as an operator to say, but it's okay to create some tech debt because doing it correctly is expensive and time consuming. So you have to figure out what these inflection points are for you. And you have to build things in a way that is proportionate to where you are, your run rate, the scale that you're going towards. And so you're probably not going to create an algorithmic self-driving account territory plan if you're a 10-person company. But how do you set yourself up to that next inflection point is, one of the hardest things as an operator to figure out where the biggest investments should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one more question for both of you. So we are sitting here currently, it is what, middle of November 2025, which has got me thinking already about 2026 and how close that is. But then I was like, hey, if we're sitting here in November of 2026, so, a year from now, is like, I want to hear from each of you one
Mhm.
prediction, one hot take, you decide how spicy it is. I just want to hear like, what do you think is going to happen for operators between now and this time next year? So Kevin, we'll start with you.
What will happen
And
for
it doesn't need to be territory related. Like it could be something like, I don't
Yeah,
know,
what do you think,
sales.
Matt?
Yeah, like it could be something like I don't know, OpenAI does something crazy. It could be go to market engineering replaces revenue operations as a job title, right? Like,
Boo.
whatever. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying any of these things, like Salesforce
Yeah.
loses market cap and HubSpot catches up, or AI native CRMs are like the new thing, or, like people go away from CRMs completely. Like, I don't know, just like over 12 months. I think about how rapidly things have changed
Mm.
over the last 12 months. And like, I have a very bad memory. So I do not remember like where or what I was doing of November 2024, but I'm sure it was totally different than where we are now. Right. And a lot has changed over the last 12 months. So I'm just curious, given that you all have obviously sat through that as well, and you have a whole lot of expertise in your areas, like what do you see happening over the next 12 months?
Yeah, the first thing that kind of comes to mind for me, and it's like very specific to this area, is some of the noise dying down on some of these new areas. And I don't think the noise is bad. It doesn't frustrate me. It makes sense that it's coming as we're all trying to kind of figure this out. One of the ways that you try to figure it out is you talk about it and see if you can drive clarity through that. But I think we're going to start to see like the real effects of some of the new tech that's available, some of the new behaviors, especially that operations folks have been able to do. And so I think those that have been able to focus on the fundamentals and kind of unlock their own skill sets through curiosity, through some of the things that Jen was mentioning. There's this cohort of people, especially in this community that I talk to, that are playing with all these different tools. These
Mm.
people have been building all of these skills, trying to solve problems and being very experimental. So I think we've got this grand experiment, which is largely being talked about right now. I think we're going to start seeing some of the results of it through really practical, operational business achievements in the next 12 months.
Do you
Love
think
that.
you'll have, Jen, before you chime in, Kevin, do you think we'll have self-driving territories?
I think we will have at least one self-driving territory on the road. We will be restricted,
Good.
I'm sure, by the local government. We'll be fighting that good fight, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
All right,
I
Jen,
love
what about
that.
you?
Okay, I want to yes and a bit of what you're talking about, Kevin, which is I think we've had a lot of success and adoption of AI as point solutions and at the individual level. We have seen broadly Scale Ventures came out with like an AI report out, and we're largely seeing almost 100% adoption at the individual level that you're at least using ChatGPT, to do your workflow, and people are seeing themselves as more productive, right? So we've got this productivity hit. What we need to move is from this individual mindset into scale and organizational rollouts and actually getting things to be true workflows. That's actually where the promise of giving folks back time and where we're going to get sellers back to revenue producing activities is we need to get to that point where we're thinking about holistic workflows and embedding AI as a component within those. So I do think that that's the energy that's happening. In terms of a bit of my prediction or my hopes is we're going to start to see marketing teams are the biggest adopters of AI across the go-to-market team, then sales, then CS, the usual. And what AI did for marketing is it solved a really big problem of how long it takes to create assets and to create content. That is getting shorter. And I think we're going to see two things. We're already seeing a lot of AI slop, bad. But we're also seeing better content, good. And the teams that have taste and that have points of view and that can utilize AI to basically be a competitive advantage are really going to win here. And I think that if you are somebody that is very passionate about this, not just in marketing, but generally speaking about better orchestration and better automation, you have 6 to 12 months where I think it could be an incredible competitive advantage to you. Where tools have not been created yet, you have to DIY it. You have to think about orchestration as like an internal capability. And the RevOps teams that are going to dive into that, which does mean like a build and buy mentality, are going to see a lot of ROI from those activities.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. All right, y'all. We are at time, so I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Kevin and Jen for dropping some knowledge and sharing as much as they did over the last hour. To all the attendees out there, thank you very much for joining us as well. But that's all I got for you, so I will let you all run, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Good to see you.